Ready?
Yeah.
All right, colleagues, good morning. As you know, consequent to a request by the chairperson of the Guyana Elections Commission to the National Task Force on the Coronavirus, there was a site visit to the Arthurtown Convention Center on Monday, the 20th of April, where a team of medical professionals in collaboration with the Commission visited to assess, based on the decisions of the Commission, what recommendations they will make in light of the COVID-19 pandemic to facilitate the national recount. The proposal from the Commission, as you're aware, was to have 10 workstations, not having more than 14 persons at any workstation at a given time. Basically, what the report has indicated to the chairperson and by extension the Commission is that the spaces identified to facilitate those 10 workstations can work. However, of those 10 workstations, they've identified 8 where there can be 14 persons, a maximum of 14 persons at any given workstation. 2 of those they've identified where there can only be at least 10 persons. So if we're to really round that off, of the 10 workstations that has been proposed, we can have at any given time a total of 132 persons at the Arthurtown Conference Center operating within those 10 workstations. What the report also detailed for us, they've actually provided 14 guidelines in terms of protocols that the Commission should implement. That is in terms of the sanitization, the frequency at which the staff and other persons present at the respective workstation should sanitize. The protocol should be used in terms of garbage disposal, the frequency at which bins and so on should be emptied, the number of bins, the rotation in terms of the lunch hours and other meal break, and of course emphasizing the importance of staff being hydrated and ensuring that the windows are open, because based on the World Health Organization protocol, that the UV in terms of getting into the building can help as a way of warding off the virus in those spaces. So there are 14 recommendations that have been provided as it relates to the protocols to be implemented by Gecom for the safety of the persons that will be in the building. And of course, they have approved accommodating the 10 workstations for the exercise. Of course, again, agreeing with Gecom that we can have at least 14 persons at 8 of those workstations at any given time, and at 2 of those, a maximum of 10 persons at any of those given workstations.
Did any of the recommendations speak to any of the 14 persons being tested before they enter the facility?
No,
or the temperature being taken or stuff like that?
Well, they've advised against it in terms of the protocols for sanitization upon entry. Nothing in the report details in terms of persons being tested and so on before they occupy the space, but of course they've emphasized a lot in terms of the sanitization protocol, the protocol in terms of the frequency at which persons should dispose of the gloves and the masks to be used and so on. All of that are things that Gecom are to implement at the venue.
Anything
during the
about sanitizing the boxes themselves, the ballot boxes themselves?
Well, they haven't spoken specifically to that, but they have given recommendation in terms of sanitization of surfaces. So I'm sure that as part of our implementation plan, as the boxes enter into the room, they will have some kind of protocol in terms of the sanitization of those materials and so on.
What plans are there to have people on standby should people complain of feeling unwell?
Well, at this point, I can't say specifically of as it relates to persons feeling unwell and the standby protocol. As we speak, the commission is meeting to finalize in terms of a draft order that was prepared for the methodology in terms of the implementation as it relates to the recount process. Of course, that order was prepared against mostly the legal framework as to persons who are required and should be present at the count, and therefore once this is something that the commission will therefore have to deliberate on in terms of what is the protocol that can be established for that.
But should you even at the basic routine level be considering having persons on standby given the fact that there is a coronavirus and even general illness?
Well, I am sure that the respective agencies, Dennis, at the party level, for example, will take these factors into consideration. But I'm speaking here specifically as it relates to the protocol that we have to adopt based on the guidelines from the National Task Force as it relates to the number of persons that can be accommodated within the building at that time. Standby methodology and protocol as it relates to will go specifically as it relates to the respective parties and observer groups and so on that will be present.
But what about Gecom's own staff that should be among the 40?
Certainly we will have to put a system in place for that. In all our operations we have considered those kind of factors, so we won't have any kind of delay as it relates to the smooth functioning of this exercise.
So Gecom itself will have people on standby?
Well, certainly.
And aside from the recommendations put by the health authorities, could you confirm whether CARICOM has responded to the recommendations made by the task force and the commission?
Specifically I can't say if CARICOM has received a copy of that report from the task force. That is one that I will have to investigate to determine whether CARICOM has received that. But in terms of any kind of travel arrangements for the CARICOM team, we have not received any further communication from the Secretary General on that.
Go ahead.
For the benefit of our listeners and viewers, how critical is this process this morning as far as getting the order in place is concerned?
Well, as you know, for any operations Gecom, we have to move ahead from a legal standpoint. And therefore, one of the things when the decision of a national recount was considered was to have the protocols gazetted in an order. And so this order, as a result of some decisions at the last commission meeting for a commissioner to prepare a draft order, that was done. It was submitted to the chairperson and subsequently circulated to the other commissioners. And so the meeting this morning is really to peruse that order to ensure that it reflects the decisions taken at the commission in relation to the methodology for the recount. Once that order has been finalized, agreed to and adopted by the commission, it means therefore we will proceed with the gazetting and of course the publication. But of course critical to that order, we must have a start date. And so that start date of course rely on some other factors, which includes also the feedback from CARICOM. And so once we're able to have that, it means that we'll be able to proceed with the gazetting of that order and also to ensure that the exercise commences within the shortest possible time.
All right, thank you.